that we can do. So, oh, okay. So today for me, what I would like to focus on, I know there's many historians with us today and speakers that will focus on many different parts of Adwa, but today I would like to just talk about one of the big roles and key characters of Adwa, which is Empress Taytu. And we do talk about her, and it is a really big part of identity that we are very blessed to have. Having a woman that we can look up to that was essential in the aspects of Adwa. But just to kind of go a little bit in depth about what was her exact role in the Battle of Adwa, and how did she help us win this battle against the Italians? That's kind of what we'll be briefly talking about today. So just to debrief about what is Adwa in general. So just to give an background, again, we reviewed that the Battle of Adwa was a historic event that happened on March 1st in 1996. Like we all know, it was a conflict that was between Italy and Ethiopia, and it ended with Ethiopia's victory. And Empress Taytu, we recognize her as a crucial character outside of Emperor Minilik as well, and other war generals and other characters, but specifically also the general public and the population of Ethiopia, that everyone contributed to the liberation of Ethiopia. Taytu also plays a really significant strategic role. So it's really interesting understanding what role she actually played. So just to kind of understand that conflict in the beginning, with the idea of something called the Scramble for Africa. So in understanding African history and talking about history in general, there's this big concept that we talk about, which is called the Scramble for Africa. So it talks about how these countries that I've listed right here, they all took part in taking bits and pieces of Africa and colonizing it and making it a territory of their own, politically, economically, socially. We see how in parts of West Africa, for example, even their lingua francas are embedded, for example, in French. And even though that's not an indigenous language of theirs, because of colonization, those are things that are part of their identities, which is something that we as Ethiopians are very proud about, is that our cultures haven't really been modified and haven't really been, at the mercy of colonization, which colonization outside of land, what it does to a culture and what it does to a people is the most devastating thing. So just understanding the Scramble for Africa, all of these countries that we see here, for example, France has one of the biggest, or is one of the biggest colonizers that we see, and then the UK being the second. But as we can see, almost every single country in sub-Saharan Africa was under the territory of a superpower at the time. But like we see in the white, we were the independent, and until today, we're also still independent. So what I'd like to say, sometimes when understanding Adwa, it's interesting to understand what was the status of all of the countries at that time. And Battle of Adwa being 1896, this is what Africa looked like in 1884. So not even 10 years before the Battle of Adwa, this was the current status of what Africa was going through. That barely, there's really no country or no territory that was free of European domination. And so that's just something to pull away from it. And when we look at the past, it's always good to mention the current status as well, and not to be political or to be a hot button issue, but there's a huge debate and there's a huge dialogue right now that's continuing that says the Scramble for Africa actually never stopped, that Africa is still, the colonization of Africa is still continuing. So I kind of put this image in as to say the status of 2023, that we still see, different countries now, not just, Italy and not just the UK, but different countries around the world that are still entering into African spaces and that are still the biggest benefactors of our resources, whether it's human or whether it's tangible and material, such as like coal or cobalt and things like that. We are still, the scramble for our resources and our land and everything is still continuing. So I would like to really say right here that it's really important that we continue the story of Adwa, so the battle and the victory that we won there. It's really good to keep that theme now, because there's still so much stuff that we still have to have and find victory over that can still be devastating to our identity now. We don't necessarily have to be, colonized in our flag, and our names don't have to be changed for colonialism to still exist. So just wanted to mention something about that. But going back to Taytu, So understanding Taytu's earlier life, Taytu was born in Wello in 1851. I wanted to mention that during the Battle of Adwa, she was only 45 when she was an advisor and a key critical role to that. So I feel like 45 is still such like a young age to be, pulling a country out of colonization and going, pretty much solely against a world power. So it just shows to the intellect and the wisdom in which she had. So she married Emperor Menelik II in 1883. And not only was she just a partner to him, but she was also an advisor to him. And she was known for many different things, but just some things I wanted to highlight. She was fluent in several languages. She was known to be a poet and a writer. She was known, fun fact, for her love for horses. She was known to be a patron of the arts and supported many Ethiopian musicians and poets. But outside of the things that she was really known for, there's a lot of also dialogue around, I think currently when we talk about Taytu, we think of her, or we paint her as a very strong individual, but we also paint her as maybe we don't talk about how much of the hard decisions that she had to make. And maybe those decisions, whenever we think of women in politics, we don't think of, the strength and the will that they need to make these decisions. So just like any other political leader and any other person that did lead battle and made these critical decisions for the country, at the time, there's a lot of evidence that said that there's a lot of mixed opinions within the political community around her. And she did have a lot of enemies and other people and rivals that tried to really take away from her reign and her leadership. And she has many stories of fighting against that. So just because, she's a woman doesn't mean that, it's just in the arts that she exists. She was also, almost like a war general and a war strategist, and all of the things and the characters that came with that. She was very key in those things as well. So a notable tactic that she's really known for that I just wanted to talk about or wanted to mention as well was that during one of the battles of Adwa, she was credited to use her deception to confuse and mislead Italian forces, it says. So before the battle, she ordered her troops to construct false camps and fires to create the impression of a larger Ethiopian force than that one that actually existed. This tactic worked to intimidate the Italians and make them believe that they were outnumbered, causing them to hesitate and delay their attack. Empress Taytu also played a key role in coordinating the movements of the Ethiopian troops during the battle. She was able to rally the Ethiopian army and guide them to strategically important positions, such as high ground overlooking the Italian encampment. This gave Ethiopian forces a significant advantage as they were able to rain down fire on the Italian troops from above and force them into a disorganized retreat. So this is just one small example of one of the strategies that she would use. But obviously knowing that Ethiopia was disadvantaged comparatively to the Italians that had an abundance of steel coming in to this battle, the Ethiopians, and a lot of these battles being led by, or tactics being led by Empress Taytu, they had to be a lot more strategic, and they had to have a lot more intellect of using the land and the geography and all of these other things that they had to use in order to beat out the invaders that were coming into the land. So it's just truly amazing to see how strategic everything was and her contribution to that. So kind of wrapping up, when we talk about Taytu's legacy, outside of us understanding the skills that she had as a diplomat, a persuader, and negotiator, not only was she dealing with diplomacy when it came to foreign affairs, but also inside the country, leading as a woman, but two, leading in times of tactics and things like that as well. There was a lot of skill that was necessary from her as well. But I think this is also an amazing truth and a legacy that exists within our identity that, in this time, there's a lot of dialogue around women and inequality of women. But if Ethiopia over 100 years ago was able to create space for women to be a part of war strategies and things like that, which is very much known to be a man's area and a man's expertise. And if there's a space for a woman to also contribute to that, it just shows to the open-mindedness and the progressiveness and just like the actual wisdom that our people had in general back then as well. So outside of us being free from things like colonization, I think that, like I said earlier, colonization is not just about land, it's also about mind and perspective. So we were actually free from many of those things that, were against the equality of women. These things, this is true and evidence that showed that, our country and our people did stand for equality of women, not just equality of women, but, they were led by women. And these are truths that were existing within their times as well. So it's an amazing legacy that we have outside of just the colonization aspect as well. So for the future of those that look up to her, she has many contributions in education and art, and all of these things that we still reap the benefits of today as well. So when we talk about Taytu, definitely a pinnacle of a character that we can look up to, that if we look more into her story, and that's something that I would love to do myself in the future as well. There's so much text out there that hasn't really been explored or isn't really out to mainstream media as well. So there's any young people that are interested in their own identities or history as well. There's a lot of credible sources out there. And I think that us as young people, and especially living in the diaspora, it's something that we can do better at exploring our history and the characters that lived in it, because without them, we wouldn't be here today. So thank you very much. If you guys have any questions, I'm here for that as well. But I will send all of my resources for that, because I think when we talk about this, our resources are very, very important as well. So I can link that for everyone as well in this.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Egeziharya, for giving us a great presentation. And of course, you described it in a good way about the role of, women, especially, the leader who is Taytu or Empress Taytu. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much again. So the next one will be about the Battle of Adwa and its impact on Pan-Africanism. It will be presented by Esetemariam. So Esetemariam is an 18-year-old senior at the international school Nido Douglas. Esetemariam is a passionate individual with a deep interest in Ethiopia and its history. She has a keen interest in public speaking, and today she will be sharing with us her research on the impact of the Adwa battle on the Pan-Africanism movement. Please join me in welcoming Esetemariam to the stage as she takes up on a journey through history and its relevance to modern times. Esetemariam, please take the stage.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me. I am really grateful to be here. And I am going to be talking about the Battle of Adwa and the Pan-African movement and how it impacted it. And I'm also going to be talking a little bit about some domestic impacts that Battle of Adwa had on Ethiopia as well. So let's talk about the Battle of Adwa a little bit first, a summary of it. So it was really the 1800s where a time when colonial expansionism was really taking effect, and it had a hold on the whole of Africa as a whole. And Egeziharya really went really in depth on this, so I won't repeat much of what she said, just that the basic overview of it is that Italy really wanted Ethiopia for several reasons, and they had the whole thing started because of the Treaty of Wuchale, which was signed in May 2, 1889, and there was this discrepancy in Article 17, which talks about foreign affairs, where on the Ethiopian side and the Amharic side, it said that Ethiopia had the right to include Italy in their foreign affairs relations, or ask for Italian advice, whereas in the Italian side, it said that Ethiopia must include Italy in all of its foreign relations, which really took away a lot of the autonomy and autarky of Ethiopia, and diminished it into protectorate in Italian terms, which was not the case for what Menelik agreed to. So what Menelik thought was a misunderstanding at first pretty soon became clear that it was not a misunderstanding. The Italians had done this purposefully, so this became a call to war. So this is a basic timeline of what happened in the Battle of Adwa. There was in 1889, Menelik takes the throne, and in May 2 of the same year, the Treaty of Wuchale signed. And then in September of 1893, Menelik finally realizes that what he perceived as a misunderstanding was not something that could be fixed because Italians had knowingly done this. So he repudiates the Treaty of Ucale and he rejects it. And then in March 1 of 1896, the battle has gone on and Ethiopians win the Battle of Adwa, and then they secure Ethiopian independence. So first, let's talk a little bit about the Pan-African movement then. So the Pan-African movement is really this movement that promotes unity, solidarity, and the development of the African people. And it has various origins. It's not something that started at one point at one time, but most of it is rooted in the events that happened during the Battle of Adwa, because a lot of these events that happened, such as 1897, the first Pan-African Conference in London, or the Organization of African Unities formation, which is the predecessor to the African Union, which is currently headquartered in Addis Ababa. And as well as today as well, there's a lot of movements that promote Pan-Africanism as well, such as the Black Lives Matter movement, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and a lot of these. There's a lot of events that can be attributed to importance to in terms of the Pan-African movement. And like I said before, they're all really steeply rooted in the Battle of Adwa, because a lot of these movements and the beginnings of these movements are inspired, and the people who began them are also inspired by the Battle of Adwa and how Ethiopia really rose up and fought against colonizers when the rest of the continent really were unable to do so at the same time as well. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of Adwa and how the outcome of the first Italo-Ethiopian War specifically the Battle of Adwa impacted the Pan-African movement. So in terms of the foreign impact of the Battle of Adwa into the Pan-African movement, it was a symbol of African resistance to colonialism. As you can see, there's a lot of impacts. And because of this, it really inspired Africans to embrace the idea of Pan-Africanism. Before this, there were some people that were trying to start the Pan-African ideal, but before this, because largely due to the colonial movement that was happening, it was more of an each country for itself and each person for themselves as well. And they're all really trying to not unite, but individually fight back against their oppressors. But after this, because the Ethiopia became such a shining beacon for the rest of Africa as well, it inspired many Africans to embrace the Pan-African ideal, and it also inspired the Pan-African movement to really emerge and spread across the rest of Africa as well. And it demonstrated that Africans were capable of defending themselves against European powers, and that in any sort of conflict between Europe and Africa, the automatic winner was not Europe. And it also challenged the widely held belief that was quote unquote scientifically proven that Africa was full of weaker or inferior people. It really challenged that, and it disproved that, because it showed that, well, if people in Africa are naturally or scientifically quote unquote weaker, then how were they able to win such a decisive battle and keep their autonomy, as opposed to not them just simply losing or not even fighting in the first place because they're so quote unquote weak. But so because it disproved this theory that Africans weren't just naturally weaker and anything, and it disproved that quote unquote scientific theory. Now people realize that they really had the power to grasp that they had the power to grasp their own fate into their hands and rise up against their own colonial oppressors as well. So it really promoted the idea that other Africans are also able to rise up and win against their oppressors as well, and they could do it in a united front. So it really promoted the idea of African solidarity, and it showed that African countries could work together and resist colonialization and defend their independence and gain their independence, and then defend it from future colonizers or people who would like to colonize it as well. So, and then like I said, it not only inspired the Pan-African movement, it also inspired people who are really key figures in this Pan-African movement, such as W.B. Du Bois, who's a famous African-American writer and public speaker, and Marcus Garvey, who also saw they both really, and a lot of other people as well, they saw the victory as a model that other African countries can follow, and therefore what they took from this and included into the Pan-African movement, included into their vision for the Pan-African movement, really impacted the Pan-African movement as a whole. So you can tell that the Battle of Adwa both directly through the movement itself, and then indirectly through the people that influenced the movement, impacted the Pan-African movement. And then there's also a lot of domestic impacts of Adwa that we have to mention as well, because like I said, just as the Battle of Adwa was a great source of unity for the rest of Africa, is also a great source of national pride and identity for Ethiopians as well. And it really demonstrated that Ethiopia is capable of defending its own sovereignty and independence against the European power. But also before this, the different regions of Ethiopia were widely separated, and the Battle of Adwa really worked as a unifying power to create to convince most regional leaders that as a one unified whole country, we were really stronger, much better off for it. So it unified the country as well as unifying the rest of the continent as well. And it helped to establish Ethiopia's position as a respected member of the international community. And Ethiopia sort of became a rallying point behind the Pan-African movement, and it's been a key part of, and because of this, Ethiopia is a key part of many international and Pan-African movements as well, such as, for example, the most obvious example is the African Union, and how when it was formed in 2002, the headquarters were situated in Ethiopia and Addis Ababa, and still now Ethiopia is a very big key member of the African Union and the United Nations as well. And that we are still a country that kept our autonomy has become, the fact that we have kept our autonomy and our own sovereignty has become key to our legitimacy today as well. And like I said before, it also has an impact on our legitimacy today. So how's Ethiopia and the Battle of Adwa, but more Ethiopia now, impacting or involved in the Pan-African movement? So again, Ethiopia continues to play an important role in the Pan-African movement today. We still are a symbol of African resistance to colonialism, while in current times, colonialism is less war and more economical. Colonization is still a thing, and Ethiopians are still part of the resistance movement, not just part of, but leaders of the resistance movement against it, because by virtue of being countries that have never been colonized back in the 1800s in the more traditional sense as well, and also by being the people who were speaking out against it so much in terms of neo-colonization again as well, we still remain leaders of African resistance to colonialism. We've always been leaders in this sense, and we will continue to be leaders as well. And we're also we are founding members and leaders of the African Union, and we're instrumental in shaping the organization's priorities and the agendas and the direction that the organization takes as well. So we're still influencing the Pan-African movement very directly, and not just indirectly as being a symbol of freedom, but also very directly as having a direct hand in the direction that organizations that are part of that influence the Pan-African movement, we influence the directions that those organizations take. And we're also an important voice for advocating for African interests in the global community. So this goes broader than just the Pan-African movement in Africa, but also the Pan-African movement across the globe, and also like our representation in the United Nations and in other world organizations, instead of just African organizations as well, for the broader global community as well. We have always been a symbol of African power and African empowerment, and the Pan-African movement as well, from an outside perspective, from people who are not part of Africa. We've always been a key figure of the Pan-African movement as well, and we still are. And also, we are the cultural and intellectual center of the Pan-African movement. So we have a rich history of literature, art, music that has been patroned by leaders starting from, like Zara said, Empress Taytu or other leaders as well. So we've always been people who've been very proud of our history, and we've been showing it in many different forms of art and forms of literature and music and philosophy. And we've influenced not only our own country, but also other African generations of African thinkers and activists. And we've also home to many prominent Pan-African activists as well. Like I said before, there are a lot of people that influenced the Pan-African movement. They took the Battle of Adwa and Ethiopian resistance to colonialism and white supremacy as a whole to heart, and used it to influence the Pan-African movement. And these weren't just foreign people. These were also Ethiopians, such as the Emperor Haile Selassie, who also took this to heart and used it to influence the Pan-African movement. And also leaders today, such as Merat, who also speak out against this, who also use our identity and who also include our strength and our empowerment in a lot of the art that they produce in order to provide a symbol of resistance and a symbol of African unity and a symbol of Ethiopian power to the rest of the world as well, and really broadcast this idea that Ethiopia remains a strong and powerful symbol for Pan-Africanism today as well. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Esetemariam. That was a nice presentation. You just described about, the impact of Adwa, which is really nice. And we are still following, the impact of Adwa. We are still following our fathers and mothers, our grandfathers, our ancestors, basically, right? So that's really a big impact, and it influenced us. And it influenced, children or, any human being that's Ethiopian throughout the world. So we are happy to know about you, Esetemariam and Egeziharya, both of you. We thank you so much. You are youngsters, but you influenced us a lot. Please, everyone, give it up to for both of them. Thank you so much.